You want to know the secret to leg locks? We're going to teach you how to hit it on everybody. All opponents that you face going to be coming in and leg lock transition. You're going to be doing it to them. So we have all the secrets mastered here. Entry, Shanti Garami, all the trade secrets released. Three-part DVD. 3 parts DVD. Revolutionize your game. It's for a limited time only. Levels. DVD 1, levels. DVD 2, next levels. DVD 3, levelless. Don't forget the prices. Click the link below. Credit card, crypto sporidium, you name it, we got it. Oh, you can do PayPal, Venmo, catch, hook. 3 parts. 1, change your life. 2, change your life and those around you. 3, change the game. Just when you thought I gave it all away, next 10 callers, 10 callers, next 10 will get my free nutrition training problem. Just when you thought the limit was limitless, next 10 callers, 10 callers will receive my free supplement and nutrition training plan. Want warheads like this? Call now. Next 10 callers, absolutely free. Just pay $1.99 shipping and handling.
Put forth was a gift to corporate America that would trickle down to the workers. We did jiu-jitsu on it, we turned it around. Did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it.
We turned it around.
Did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it. We turned it around. Did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it.
We turned it around.
Did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it, did jiu-jitsu on it. We turned it around.
All right, so first and foremost tonight, quick shout out to Pete Linguiso. So I wanted to revisit a series that did, I want to say like 2017, 2018, and it's just one of those mount series that previously filmed. I've updated some of the cueing and some of the details, but using some of the footage, I think will be easy to do. I'm going to play it muted so that way I can kind of talk over it as well, and if I see any comments or anything coming up, I'll take a look and respond off of that. But I think it's kind of interesting, again, going back and looking at some of these things and how they all kind of tie and play together. So I'm going to get this thing queued up. So again, looking back at me and Johnny with our long hair. But here I'm focusing, pretty much talking about how we have a hip line, how we have our shoulder line, and then using the equation that we use to explain how we need to kind of separate everything and what we want to identify. Realistically, things that we want to, really be aware of is that depending on how you want to set up your initial control, whether you're going from low mount to high mount, it becomes interesting because, again, if we're lazy with our feet, depending on when we establish our mount position, it can actually be detrimental to us in the actual setup. So a lot of people like to initially start with maybe a grapevine. And grapevines could be good, but the other thing that we need to be aware of with grapevines is if we did the same thing, and the person on bottom grapevine's back, our hips actually get locked down. So we need to be aware of that. So, there's ways that we can go ahead and, go plantar flexion on the ankle, and also be able to, push off of the hips to be able to move. But let's go ahead and say that we are in low mount, and we're actually, our center of gravity is still kind of high, and we're going to look at establishing, that cross collar grip to initially start. And realistically, again, when we get into this kind of position, if we're lazy with our feet, we get bumped, right? So one of the things that we can actually do, if you're somebody that loses, base or balance, we're going to really emphasize on this video that we previously did, using your big toe, so that way, if you needed a base, you can be able to at least establish that. So if you're not going to push off of somebody's, hips or off of their femur, using your big toe, at least next to their hip line, will at least start to limit a little of that kind of control from there. Now, again, more often than not, our opponents aren't just going to allow us to just, get our hands in. So we're going to have to kind of work to, feed into this. And again, we could have, our opponents could have their hands here. They could be active. And more, again, what we have to be, aware of, again, a good, and to be completely honest with this, again, people aren't going to sit here in a static defense kind of position. If they do, they're, again, mobilizing their own hips. That's not good for them. But the thing, here, I'm just going to start to look at using like an ice scraper kind of, grip to be able to slide in. Now, the thing that we want to be aware of when we make this grip, and I've kind of improved some of the ways that I've gone about teaching this now, is that we want to make sure that we have a good solid connection to be able to set this thing up. But the other thing that we really kind of need to be aware of is that when we start to get into some of these positions, making a connection, but also, again, really emphasizing that kind of wrist flexion, and then even a little radial deviation. So again, there's a lot of really good resources on arm wrestling that you can find online on YouTube, and there's stuff that we have in the programming that really addresses exercises that you can do at home and things to work on. But again, when we talk about making good grips, this is one of those times where really emphasizing having that strong connection, to initially start to separate, in this case, Johnny's head away from his left shoulder and upper arm becomes kind of important. Now, again, jiu-jitsu and a lot of this comes back to, again, angles, rotations, and asymmetries. 12 and 6 is typically bad if I need to control somebody. Even 90 degrees isn't necessarily ideal because, again, even perpendicular, our opponent still has some ways that they can off balance and be able to set us up. So, again, we want to look at being as asymmetrical as possible. Now, the thing is, if we go back to making sure that, in this case, you're going to see me go on my big toe on my right foot in a minute, I'm going to be blocking off Johnny's left hip, but then I'm going to put my left leg out. And the reason why I'm going to go ahead and do this, is multitude of reasons. But realistically, if he goes to bump me, there's only one major way that he can actually try to bump me, in this case, because my left leg acts as a kickstand going out. And when it goes out, it's going in between the hip line and the shoulder line to kind of work off of this. Now, this is why, again, this becomes kind of important to understand off of this. I'm going left hand palm up, and again, I'm going to have good elbow flexion, but I'm going to make sure I'm still kind of, again, in this arm wrestling, rising wrist flexion, and minimal, we'll put it this way. I'm going to make a grip, but I'm going to have minimal kind of just rolling the fist from here because, again, I need to make sure I'm cupping, rising, and really connecting myself to the ground. My left leg's going to go out. Now, if my left leg goes out in between the hip line and the shoulder line, because again, I am in this position of essentially external rotation of my shoulder to a certain degree, just, certain and supination of my forearm. What's going to end up happening off of this is a lot of people may want to try to sweep under and take this left leg, like they can, go ahead and start to move out. If I have a really good cross collar palm up grip, it's actually going to make it easier for me to control the person. So this is where they take the bait, and this is where the cross collar arm trap series that we put together years ago, kind of came from. So what ends up happening again is if he takes the bait from here, all I'm going to end up doing is leg curling my leg back. When I start leg curling my leg back out of this deal, right? It's that right arm now essentially becomes immobilized. So again, in the cross collar, and if we want to look for a choke, we need to separate the head away from the shoulders. We started by separating the head away from the left shoulder, and now, again, for me to finish this kind of choke, especially if we're looking at from a cross-collar choke standpoint, in this specific configuration, for me to win the battle is I have to separate his head now away from his right, which now means I need to take away the movement patterns of his right. I need to decrease the mobility of his right arm, at which point now he either has to comply or he ends up being submitted. So right now, by me going to that arm trap, and more so specifically, it's an arm trap more of his upper right arm. It now decreases that movement pattern, decreases the mobility, and now really puts him in a very compromised spot. So now in this case, you're seeing me go thumb in, palm down in this. I'll go ahead and tell you now with the different variations, you can reach your right arm long and on that diagonal angle and slide it back. You can go into this position and go thumb and grab from here. There's multiple ways that you can go ahead about doing this. I don't care which way you go. Again, that ties into the, what variation do you need to do? Or what variation do you want to do? I don't care what variation you want to do as long as you separate the head away from the right, upper arm and the shoulder. So in this case, again, in the older kind of series, I'm going to go ahead and I think I go here, thumb in, or no, actually, maybe I slide it back. Yep, in this case, I do slide it back. Now, even though I've done the arm trap, here's the detail that you can't see on the backside, which I go over in this video, is here I actually am still on my big toes. I'm now going to drive on a diagonal angle from his left hip, aka his left hip, my right hip, towards now his right shoulder. When we drive on this diagonal, the thing that we want to be aware of is we don't want to have my hips lift up. I want to think almost kind of like I'm snailing or inchworming on the ground. So again, you're going to see almost kind of like we're driving, forward. And again, you can do many different variations. You can, again, exhale, so that way it takes some of the slack out. We can go ahead and do some stuff with posterior pelvic tilt. We can go ahead and do some other stuff with pelvic floor and do a couple other things with this as well. Again, they're all variables that go into this, but this is one of those things that, again, the more that we can actually, really emphasize those kind of qualities, it'll become easier to do. So again, when we slide into this position, we need to be aware, again, when we're talking about asymmetrical, we want to still be going on a diagonal. The more that we end up 12 or 6 or we squeeze and we pull up, that becomes bad. So if my head ends up over his head directly, that's bad. Because again, we're trying to separate the head away from one arm and shoulder and then ultimately separate the other. And again, there's different variations you can use. I'm using the big toe with dorsiflexion going on this angle to go ahead and push. You can also go plantar flexion and cup around the hip and the femur as well, if that's another option that you would like to do. And we get the finish off of this. So again, we're really emphasizing getting a good starting cross-collar palm up grip, at which point, whatever arm I have the cross-collar grip palm up to start, I can put that leg out to the side, as long as I maintain like kind of a kickstand. That leg that goes out to the side can now go ahead and be between the hip line and the shoulder line. if we maintain a good cross collar palm up grip and we put the leg out so that way they take the bait, this is when we can go ahead and start to go arm trap. So now, that's what we look at like as an arm trap over. Now, what if they don't take the bait? So now, if they don't take the bait to this and they're starting to defend in on that cross collar palm up grip again, this is where now I'm going to take my left leg and I'm actually going to bump above his elbow. I think I'm right on his elbow when I start to do this, but the goal here realistically is to get my thigh kind of trying to pinch in and collapse down again on his upper arm. Now, when we get to that position, okay, the thing that we need to be aware of now is we can't really go over the top palm down grip. But that's fine. This is where we can now counter this with a symmetrical cross collar palm up grip. Now, whatever hand is on top is the side that we're going to end up leaning towards. And again, we can't have two grips tight. We need to have one that's significantly, like think of it like Goldilocks and Three Bears. Too little, too much, just right. If I have a really good grip on one, I can be a little bit more relaxed on the other so I have more mobility when I restrict the one. So whatever one in this case, I started with my left hand with the cross collar palm up grip. To get my right hand in, I actually went behind and underneath my left. So now my left hand's on top. So I'm going to end up leaning towards his left shoulder to finish this. Again, when we get into that finishing position of the grip, there's many details to grip, and when we say good grip, but we want to think again, once we're in here, radial deviation to get this rising motion. So if it's kind of hard to see from here, but try to slide it in, getting this kind of pull with wrist flexion so that way I can then cup and then be able to go ahead and finish with the majority of my connection coming from my pinky and my ring finger, and then rolling the wrist through. When we go to finish, again, with a symmetrical cross-collar grip, it's going to want to square us back up along the head. So I have to make sure that I maintain that asymmetrical angle. So here it's going to be like towards 1 o'clock, even somewhat 2 o'clock, or if we were going over the other side, we'd be going 11 or 10. This leg can drop back as long as it's not below the knee line, and therefore I can go ahead off that big toe, driving off that angle, going ahead and extending. And again, this is where I'm just showing that as you go for a symmetrical cross-collar choke, the tendency again is if we squeeze, we pull up, we're going to square up on the person. We can't, we have to be as disciplined as possible, with this to make sure that we maintain some kind of asymmetrical, positioning out of it. So again, this time I think I go right arm over the top. So again, you're going to see me now start to move myself towards 11, 10 o'clock. And we'll get the finish out of that. So we had an arm trap over, we have an arm trap in, and now we also have an arm trap down. There's a lot more to the series that I have, and I'm just kind of going to go over 3 or 4, revisiting this stuff. A lot of this is still on my YouTube channel, so you can find it there. There's a playlist with a lot of it as well, and then all the additional new stuff is on the Integral Combat Methods website, and then also some of it, old details are available on georgesamuelson.com. So here, we're now starting to look at, he doesn't take the bait when I put the leg out, and when we go to do the trap in, he's going to start to kind of roll this position to come back over. So now we're just going to ride it down. So now we're just going to ride this over my knee straight down, over the top. Because again, what we're looking to establish, at least starting in this position, is to restrict the movement pattern of his right arm, because we've already started to separate the head away from the left arm. Now we just got to beat the right, and more so specifically the right upper arm. Once we start to establish that, then we can go ahead and start to decrease the mobility, at which point this is where we, again, like we talked about in one of the other videos, the limiting factor to me now winning this battle on this side is going to be the mobility of my right arm, more so specifically my right upper arm. That's why I'm still staying on my big toes, because if I come off my big toes on that hip line, I get beat, especially if this person starts to try to hip or bump or flare their legs. And again, as we're going over these moves, remember, this is not going to be a static position. These are different options of what you can do based off of wherever step you are in 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, because again, your opponent's going to be defending a lot. So once we start to go ahead and ride this down, I'm going to go back again, and I'm going to go palm down. Again, I can go, in this case, thumb in, palm down. I can reach my right arm over and slide that back, because the whole key thing that I need to do is beat that mobility of that arm to start. Now, again, pretty much what you're seeing is that when I trap that arm out and under, or start to roll that arm out to the outside, palm down is going to be my friend. If it gets trapped and bumped in, that's when, you know, palm up is going to be my friend to get back in on that grip. Again, I'm on my big toes. And as I drive, again, I'm not trying to lift my hips up. I'm trying to drive forward, and all the other details that apply. Exhale, posterior pelvic tilt, all the other kind of stuff that goes on. So again, we get a good palm up grip to start. We ride it over the top. We keep our base. And there's transitions to all the other tacos that we could go ahead and hit, but we're not even worried about those for right now. Again, this is one specific series. We start to beat the right upper arm. Again, my right arm has more movement pattern available, has more motor patterns, and it has more mobility. We're restricting his as it goes. So right now, as long as I don't make a dumb decision, it should be a good spot. Now, once I get back to this, the arm is in, but I should have a pretty good separation. And then I start to drive again. If I squeeze and I pull up on my grip, I'm going to end up losing on this. That's why I'm going to drive forward, because again, the goal here is to, the finishing part of this is to separate the head away from the right upper arm, which is what I'm trying to do here. And we get that set. So the last one that I'm going to go through for tonight, revisiting this. A lot of people struggle about getting bumped out or, escaping because they feel that they can't really, control somebody. But a lot of it comes back to you controlling yourself in this position and making sure that you have good movement and motor patterns and still good mobility for yourself. So this becomes one of those times of, ideally you should be going from mount to from upgrading from there if you don't get them to submit or have them submit themselves going to the back. But this is one of those times, especially in the gi, where having a really good cross collar palm up grip can be your friend. And this is where we start to break our rule about moving backwards. Because again, sometimes we move backwards to move forwards. So again, a lot of these principles are still going to be in place here of what we were doing before. I'm on a big toe on my right side, my right ankle and foot to start to try to limit some of that left hip bump. So that way, if he were to try to take me over that one side, my left leg would end up kind of going out to start to play to this whole, series of options of what I want to be able to do. But again, if I pin him to that side, what ends up happening again, I have a predicting or a probability that that's going to be one of the few ways that he can kind of move. So this is where a back step here can almost seem to be too good to be true. Because if we have really good pressure and we're restricting their motor pattern and their mobility, if we give a little, sometimes people will take the bait. And this is going to be the bait. When I go back to back step here, I may be moving back to either top half guard or top side control. But what I want to get to happen here, and when we're showing in this demo, is I want to get Johnny to follow me. Because if I can get him to follow me to a degree, now I'm going to be able to move my right hand and either go right in to a cross collar palm up or palm down grip, separating his head away from his right shoulder, or I could just reach right past his right arm and move from there. Again, by me staying on my big toe, I can also start to limit how much mobility he has at his left hip and left femur. Again, you're going to see in this position, ideally, what I would want is more of a cupping motion with my right wrist cupping and being able to keep that separation. So that way, as I drive down again, you'll see that I'm still on my right big toe. I'm able to drive through this motion. Move back to mount if I want, and get the tap. So again, I'm going a palm up grip, cross collar, getting a good setup and using a back step, because even if we start to end up kind of in like a half guard kind of position or even a little kind of side control with that, the whole goal that we're trying to get right now is just try to get the guy, in this case Johnny, to kind of follow, so that way as he's trying to move on this, if my right arm reaches past, I can get to a good spot. Here again, I'm going short, and I can go thumb in, palm down right off the bat, or I can reach back and then slide back. Generally speaking, again, I'd have you start to work off of that. And because there's a lot of other options that we can go ahead and start to actually throw into this as well. Again, for this series of what I'm doing for tonight, and some of the videos you can see, there's more, again, on my YouTube channel. If you're not subscribing, take a look at that. And then also on the website, integralcombatmethods.com. You'll see again here with my left ankle, my left foot, as I ride it back over, notice I'm not being lazy with that left ankle. I'm actively hooking against his left hip and his left femur. Because that way, ultimately, what's going on is his upper body is pinned one way, his lower body is pinned the opposite way. So we start to break down some of that core musculature. Becomes a very compromised position for him to not have the mobility to be able to have motor patterns. It puts me in a good spot to, again, get a finish. So again, This is just revisiting a series that, filmed this back, I want to say like 2017, 2018. And there's more to it, more updates, but I figure it's kind of interesting when you start to look at, some of the ways that you can arm trap even from mount and get that isolation of a head and an arm away from another. And again, using a very similar thing that we use in this and a little bit more in depth, there's ways that we transition to more tacos and more setups that, based off of what our opponent gives us, allows us to make some good decisions off of here. So again, thanks for tuning in. Again, shout out to Pete Lingesso tonight, and I will see you guys next time.